Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Graying Jedi podcast. I am Urza Master. Joining me as always, Jedi Master Psyllium Maas and Lord Uther. Welcome, fellow Jedi Masters, to the Council Chambers, where we venture yet again to that galaxy far, far away in an era before any we've seen before in Disney Plus's The Acolyte. We jump into this week's episode feet first, and as if we were taking a large bath in a rock formation on an ocean world, I'll turn it over to Jedi Master Psyllium Maas to give us a little bit of backside of this episode, and some things we might need to know. So, without further ado, Psyllium Maas, inform us.
Thank you, Jedi Master Urza Master. Thank you, Jedi Master Lord Uther. And thanks, Graying Jedi and Star Wars fans everywhere. We are on episode 6 of Star Wars The Acolyte, and we are back to inverse titling. This is Teach Corrupt. You will recall that earlier episodes were titled Justice, Revenge, and other split screens. And then we had our day and we had our night, and now we are back to Teach Corrupt. Hanelle Culpepper is our director. She was the first African-American director and first woman director that ever launched a new Star Trek series, as she was responsible for the first 3 episodes of Season 1 of Picard. So we are familiar here at Pending Rebrand with Hanelle's work. So she launched Picard, and in doing so earned her place in history. But she had done other shows in the television era: the 90210 reboot, Parenthood, Criminal Minds, Revenge, Grimm, and some episodes of Star Trek Discovery. So she has her bona fides when it comes to episodic modern peak television. The writers, showrunner, creator Leslie Headland, and Jocelyn Biot. And Jocelyn is interesting. She is a New York City playwright and actor. And I'm speculating here, so forgive me if I cross some boundaries or maybe stray from a certain point of view. But Leslie Headland, when she assembled her writer's room for this show, and you'll remember had 7 female voices and 2 men on the overall writing staff, she said that she assembled people from all sides of the Star Wars spectrum, writers who were committed, passionate Star Wars fans, to writers who may not have worked on Star Wars but were in the science fiction fantasy genre, like House of the Dragon and so forth, Ahsoka. And then she had one writer that she referenced who had never seen a Star Wars, had never expressed any interest in Star Wars, and she wanted that writer on the staff as a counterbalance to some of the more impassioned fans. And Jocelyn's credits as a woman of Ghana descent, a New York playwright and actor, she could fit the bill as the unnamed writer Leslie was referencing when she was talking about someone that just came to it with a completely blank slate, and instead she relied on her for force of character and so forth, and being able to just pinpoint the human drama, which this episode very much makes the focus. After a dazzling display of lightsaber and fight choreography that we had in episode 5, Night, here we slow things down. We start reassembling the pieces. I know that Ursa and Lord Uther are fond of calling these bridge episodes, or laying the foundation for future events, or maybe events in the past. And that it's very obvious to the viewer. That doesn't take away from the overall effect of the episode or what it's trying to convey to us, friends, because I have to say, if for no other reason, this is the week that Star Wars got sexy. All right, forget Adam Driver maybe toweling off after a tough workout in The Last Jedi. Here we're going the full Jacinto, and it's only because we're on Disney Plus, probably. Although they have had some racier content recently enter the menu. I mean, can you think of another Star Wars feature or television show or animated short or what have you that suggested full nudity? And in fact, even sort of played off a full frontal scene, at least by the reaction of the characters on camera. And I mean, talk about abs, abs, abs. Manny Jacinto, I'm convinced that this is not the same body type that Urza Master raved about from his work in, say, The Good Place. Here is somebody who took his training seriously, and we're all getting the rewards, as you can see, because this man is fit. And if more Darksiders look like this, we might have seen a lot more Sith. There might have been more than the rule of 2, if you know what I'm saying. But what's fascinating, because I think we can all agree that it's his character, Khmer, who kind of takes center stage in this one. We have dueling narratives. We have Khmer and Osha on an unknown planet, and we have Sol and May basically in orbit, then out of orbit, then doing that. And then for sort of a third line, we have the Jedi on Coruscant, led by Vernestra Rowe, scrambling to kind of catch up. But I think it's the Jacinto Khmer story that gets center stage and demands it. And we heard this in the previous episode with his dialogue with Sol. And we get even more of it here. I mean, this guy is a little misunderstood. At least he wants you to believe he is. And what's driving this Sith user is not, I want to conquer the galaxy. I want my armies, my droid armies and my stormtroopers and everything, and I want to inflict fascism and authoritarianism and totalitarianism. He wants to be able to practice his religion the way that he is comfortable doing it. He wants to express himself, which is expressed through the dark arts. Little Harry Potter reference there. And he doesn't want to be erased because of these rules set by the Jedi, who seem to think that they have the overall voice and authority over the Force. And there's, I mean, all sorts of parallels you can draw with that. Somebody who wants to have their rights as an individual, to express themselves, spiritually, without being castigated, scorned, cast aside, punished, arrested, executed, however you want to say it. I mean, this is strong stuff. And I completely am buying this argument. I mean, if ever you were going to make the Sith seem sympathetic, even when Palpatine is luring Anakin to the dark side in Episode 3, you see him as the serpent in the garden, the slithering snake who pours poison into innocent Anakin's ear and corrupts him, which is exactly what Khmer is trying to do, first with May and now with Osha. But in doing so, you can't help but say to yourself, like, he does have a point of view, right? Like, he wants nothing more than to exist and be able to be his best version of himself. That just happens to be exploring and utilizing the dark side, which we, as Star Wars fans and fans of the light, have grown to think of as just evil. And he mentions the emotions that the dark side produces: fear, anger, hate, but also desire, both in a physical sense, as he tempts Osha with the ideas of pleasure. When he taunts her to kill him, he's completely disrobed, or at least extremely vulnerable, and daring her to ignite the saber and take his life, which would complete her journey to the dark side if she were to do so, and she resists. But by the end of the episode, you know, she's kind of dark side, you know, curious, and she can't help herself but be drawn to this this symbol, his mask made of cortosis, which is strong enough to even withstand a direct blow from a lightsaber, as we saw during the battle on Night on Kofar. You're yelling at the screen, "Don't do it, don't do it," knowing that it's the inevitability of tragedy and that she's going to put the helmet on. Now, we don't know what effect that's going to have or how that hastens whatever her journey is, but this is something we discussed in our previous Graying Jedi. Make sure you're checking the archives. That we're going to get this reverse, because while she is being tempted and slowly giving into this temptation, Sol is trying to reason with May as to what may have gone on Brendok and been the source of all of this trauma. You spend a while on the ship thinking, is he blinded by his own feelings for his former Padawan, that he can't see that this is an imposter, and it's only the intrepid tracker Basil who has sniffed out literally that this is not Osha but May, which again makes for some nice sort of break up the mood moments there as he's trying to convey that information. Eventually he does, because Sol proves that he's been playing the long game. And I think when he embraces May and sounds like it's Osha, to me, to this viewer, I think he's figured it out at that point, that she is not who she says she is. There's a couple of moments that suggest that he's aware of it and he's just playing out the long game. I love when he tries to get her to fix the ship, which would be a natural for Osha as a mechanic, but May doesn't probably have that mechanical strength, and so she has to reprogram her pip droid just to be able to run the diagnostics and so forth. So I thought that was a nice little trap he may have laid for her to confirm his suspicions. We're kind of running in place on that because he keeps saying, "I want to tell you what happened," and I think the reason we were running in place is because it's the next episode that will spend a lot of time back on Brendok. And I want to say that following this episode, I think something that Jedi Master Urza Master alluded to last week in his alternative suggestion of where we're going with the story, I think there's more evidence that he too may have stumbled upon or actually zeroed in on where they're going. I think that Vernestra Rwoh, who is presented in the High Republic books and comic books as a wise, beyond her years, child prodigy Jedi Knight, in the ensuing 70 or 80 years from those books that we've been reading and enjoying to now, that she may have skeletons in her closet. And I think the idea that perhaps maybe an Order 66 was given for the Brendok Witches' Coven. Perhaps Saul was the lone voice that felt uncomfortable executing that, whereas Indara, Kalneka, and Torben were following orders or were happy to eradicate these dark Night Sister types. We're still ahead of the game. We'll have to wait and see. But I feel like Vernestra plays a part in this. Keemir does reference that he had a Jedi Master. Whether he's telling the truth or not, we don't know. And that he suffered abuse or was even expelled by this master, betrayed by this master. And some eagle-eyed internet denizen pointed out that those scars on his back, they could have come from a unique Jedi weapon, a lightsaber whip, which is Vernestra's trademark from the books and the comic books and so forth. I mean, it's a lightsaber, but it also can extend with the qualities and elasticity of a whip, which is really cool because we've never seen that in any Star Wars medium before. So a lot to chew on, gentlemen. Again, an episode that took its time and was patient, but may have really set the table for a rousing conclusion and so forth, and maybe some really big emotional swings. Who wants to talk about Teach Corrupt?
Well, I like this episode, but I was a little disappointed with how predictable this series has become because the whip scars on his back obviously tie him to Vernestra, and that kind of, I don't know, it seems a little on the nose. I feel like now we sort of know where things are going. Somehow there was a fallout between him and her once upon a time, and she's probably not as pure and clean as a Jedi Master should be, and kind of paints the Jedi in sort of this questionable light, which, okay, I get it. They're kind of full of themselves, but now you're sort of rehabbing the Sith, which feels a little wrong. And I would hope that there is some greater, darker power at work here, and that they, you call it Plagueis, Palpatine, whatever, that the play is that that greater, darker force corrupted Vernestra Rwoh to do whatever it was she did to Kimir to drive him to the dark side because he's so powerful with the Force. He's going to be the one looking for the power of two to try and put out the Sith or to propagate the Sith. I also think this kind of builds towards Anakin's storyline and being conceived by the Force, because May and Osha were conceived by the Force as far as we know thus far. So this could all be a Plagueis / Palpatine sort of setup to figure out how that happened, how that worked, get the inner workings of this from this power of two, and then off them. You know, all right, we've got what we need to sow the seeds for whatever next wave of Sith that we want to defeat the Jedi in time, or when the time comes. Like, it feels a little convenient. The one thing is we know the end game. Like, we know in, you know, the original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, the sequel trilogy, none of these characters are around. So we know that at some point, whether by time or by battle or whatever, all these characters die. So whatever that may mean, it has to set up something. And so inevitably it's going to be predictable, not unlike a Strange New Worlds where we know Captain Pike is eventually going to die. But you could at least make it interesting, give it some twists and turns, or maybe it's a alternate timeline or something, which, you know, we've had enough of those of late, but I really hope it's building to some other head than, you know, a failed Padawan who seeks revenge, and that was Kimir's path to the dark side, and that's all this is. It should be setting up something greater if it's going to be this predictable. That being said, I really enjoyed the episode. I thought it was a great flip the script. I thought it was... I had a feeling Soul knew what was going on. Probably before they even got back to the ship, and I think we're going to find that out in the next episode. And the reason why he played into it is because he needed to have this out with May. And it's going to build to a final showdown between probably these three Force users, you know, Kimir, Soul, and Rwoh, with all the other Jedi caught in the crossfire, probably Osha and May too. And I have a feeling whatever comes of it in the end, if they're building it this way, it's going to be unsatisfying, unless there's some larger construct at work here. Which I would really hope that that's what they're doing. But if it comes down to it and it's just like, well, this happened, this is just a Jedi story where everybody dies in the end, you know, when lightning strikes and everybody dies, something your English teachers tell you never put in your creative short stories. Yeah, okay. It's an interesting story, but is it impactful? Is it consequential? No. I feel like it'd be a huge waste because this so far the series has been really good, and Manny Jacinto, for all the work he's put into this character, deserves a better payoff. So that's my take on it. I'm pulling a Lord Uther. I'm going, I want to see this play out before I pass judgment, but that's how I feel.
I think they're in a bad spot, and here's what I mean by that. There's several things that put them in a bad spot. There's only 2 episodes left. Are they going to do a second season? Because there's rumors out there of a second season, and so I think that's why they're in a slightly bad spot. Because if you're going to do a second season, you need this season to conclude, but you need a way for it to keep going, right? So I think that puts them in a tough position. This is something that hit me as Jedi Master Psyllium Maas and I were discussing before we started taping the podcast is, oh, well, maybe this is correcting, or maybe this is making the prequel or the sequels look a little bit better, blah, blah, blah. At some point, or let me rephrase that. When are they going to step away from correcting all the past mistakes, if that's what they want to call them, and move forward with a different story? It's kind of like, how many times are we going to remaster the original trilogy, adding in special effects here and there? When are we just going to say, that's it? Like, this is a great story. This is a great movie. These were the effects for the time. It's all good. Let's move on. Or like adding Hayden Christensen into the end of Return of the Jedi, right? Like, why? We don't need to keep retconning everything or justifying it. We're beyond that. So at what point are you going to, and that was kind of my hope for this, but I kind of see the direction we're going in, right? To Urza Master's point. At what point can we step away from all these movies and just move on? We can't keep correcting the sequels. We can't keep justifying the prequels. I want a different story. And that's where I'm hoping it's going to go, right? Because we keep talking about how no one can be left over that knew about the Sith. Or is really the people that knew about it just going to keep it quiet because they don't want to tell the rest of the Jedi and throw the Order into chaos, and that's what leads to everything that happens in the prequels. That could be somewhere they're going, right? And I don't know how I feel about that, because it's kind of, I feel like they're, at different times, they're trying to justify the Sith and break down the Jedi and make them culpable or questionable, and I don't know why we need to go that route, right? Sometimes there's just good, and sometimes there's just bad. And here's where I'm going to kind of bring it to present day. I think, it's not a political statement, but I think we've kind of gotten away from that, right? There's all this gray. Hello. You're welcome, everyone. There's all this gray area, and I feel like that's what they're trying to pull the Sith and the Jedi into this gray area. I don't think you really need to do that. I don't think you need to justify their positions on everything, or throw this, make everything questionable. There's good guys, there's bad guys. That's just the way it is sometimes. But I also think that was part of the beauty of the original trilogy, in a sense, right? Like, you knew who the bad guys were, you knew who the good guys were, you were going to cheer for somebody. That's great. I don't think we need to keep doing this, in a sense. Now, with all that being said, I thought it was an okay episode. I think it's a bridge to the next 2. So I'm not going to give it a rating that I was originally going to give it, because I keep referencing backwards to Boba Fett, that after viewing it again, I saw what was going to happen, right? Last point. I still think they're in a tough spot, depending on how this ends, because this could influence what's going to happen with the Rey movies. And I was hoping they were going to go in a different direction with that. Now I don't know what they're going to do. Not that I want to be able to predict that. I just don't want it to turn into tropiness, which is kind of what we're alluding to, right? Like, they're kind of going back. The idea of they have to keep correcting everything or justifying things makes it tough for me. So again, thought the acting was good. The little rabbit guy that's running around sniffing things out.
Basil.
He's in there for comedic relief. Like, to me, he's like a Jar Jar, but it doesn't do it for me because just something doesn't work right with that character. I don't know why. I put basil on my pasta. Like, I don't put it into a Star Wars episode. So that's kind of how I feel about that. To me, the Khmer character and Saul are carrying this entire thing. I almost would like it just to boil down to them at some point. I'm doing a lot of just like, it might seem like I'm complaining. I'm doing a lot of contemplating as to where, because this could go, we've said this before, this could go very, very well. This could go very, very bad. And strange, to Urza's point, and you said it before, and I was thinking it as you were saying it, that's the incredible thing about Strange New Worlds. We know where it's going, and you're still roped into it every week, wondering what's going to happen next, and looking forward to what's going to happen next, because they've thrown curveballs at us, right? And that's a good thing. And I was kind of hoping that's where the Acolyte was going to go, and now I feel like there are no curveballs. They're just giving us a meatball right down the middle every single time. I don't want that anymore. That's what I was looking for with this. So I know I just rambled a lot, but that's all I have to say about that. That's how I feel. Whatever that means. I don't know.
So,
Help.
was the unknown planet Octo that's been bandied about on the internet this week? Is this? It certainly bears some similarities, and I do want to point out in this era, because I do read the High Republic books and comic books and the like. The galaxy has not yet been fully mapped. Hyperspace lanes are still being discovered in this era, and planets that were previously unknown are being marked and explored and so forth. So it could just be that this is a planet the Jedi and Coruscant and the core worlds have not yet fully embraced or acknowledged. However, that could have also been a sly, as Lord Uther points out, a sly nod to The Last Jedi. This is the planet. Imagine if Khmer was using as his base a planet where the first Jedi temple had been established and where Luke would later exile himself.
Which brings me to this point. I almost felt like he was, so at one point he said a line, I can't remember, it was something along the lines of, whatever is in there is only what you take with you. I thought he said that at some point to May. Like she was going to go somewhere, or she was feeling a presence or something, which, was that what it was? Okay, it was the helmet. I almost felt like it was going a Dagobah route in a sense, that she was going to be tempted or challenged, and whatever she took with her was going to make her feel that way. That's the other reason. And the opening shot completely looks like Octoon or Octu, whatever you want to call it. I was thinking of the U2 album. But where's I going with that? Oh, I don't think we've ever seen a planet that was called Unknown, by the way. Like, that they actually said unknown. And to me, it was covering up that it was Octu.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with Lord Uther. I think there's a lot of justification going on of the more recent Star Wars stuff that was probably a little less successful in terms of being Star Wars material. I don't hate it, but at the same time, it's getting a little tired, and I agree. We need some kind of a curveball, because so far, I feel like I've known where this story has been going, and where it continues to build to, and I'm not saying that that's unwelcome. Like, in some ways, I do like a mindless story that just plays in a very linear fashion. You know where things are going to end up, and you enjoy the ride. You enjoy the payoff, even knowing what's going to happen. That's why I like to rewatch stuff. Like, I know what's going to happen in A Fistful of Datas, but I will watch that episode over and over and over. You know, I know what's going to happen in A New Hope, but I will watch that movie over and over and over because it's good. So far, the Acolyte, like, I haven't really felt surprise. I've felt like everything is unfolding in generally the sense I expected. And if that's the way it goes, okay. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad series. I think this series is getting a lot of undue hate, and I don't understand it. But I think there's healthy skepticism in, how successful is this series going to be? Is it going to just be a vehicle series where it's kind of telling us the story of the downfall of the Jedi, in a sense, which, frankly, I have a feeling that our friend, Ms. Baldhead, is probably a Sith. That would be the only curveball I can think of that would set this up in a way that makes a little more sense, which is why she's secretly meeting about what's going on in the Senate, trying to position sort of political forces. That could push this towards the territory of like setting up Palpatine's, ease of takeover and kind of, again, it's justifying episode 1, but that would be a twist at the end. Again, it's a little predictable because I feel like I figured it out. But if that's like the big twist, is like, that's why Kimir is a bit more, shall we say, understandable, forgivable, is because, he did suffer at the hands of his master, but she was also said she was a dark side user this whole time, setting up a grander scheme at the direction of a Darth Plagueis or, Darth Sidious, perhaps. That would be okay. Like, I could get on board with that, and that's like, sort of kicking the Padawan out of the nest to go find their own acolyte and setting up later generations of dark side users, and or doing the research into the conceived by the Force. The only thing that I would say that gives me pause in that is, like, you still have May's storyline. She becomes a Jedi that defeats all the Sith involved and then just sort of fades into obscurity because they have to cover up this whole Sith thing so nobody freaks out. And that's just the way things are set up in the Jedi Council now. Like, something about that stinks. I feel like the resolution's not going to be, it's filling the swamp rather than draining it, and that, I don't know. I do think that this comes back to the original trilogy, the Joseph Campbell mythos of there's good guys and bad guys. Good guys wear the white hats, bad guys wear the black hats, and in the end, the princess is saved. Like, I know that's a simple storyline, but that's sort of the beauty of Star Wars, is that there were very clear distinctions between good and evil, and really the gray area was just the journey to one side or the other. I'm not saying I'm against graying Jedi, obviously, but I think that this wanders into that territory of a reboot, and I don't want to see that. And it wanders in the territory of filling in gaps that really don't need to be filled in, and it's giving me pause. So I will put it out there. Let's give it the Kyber Crystal ratings and final thoughts.
Yeah,
Jedi
real
Master
quick.
Psyllium Maas.
Oh, wait, hold on, real quick. I think you hit the nail on the head with something though about Osha and May. And I kind of said this before, and with what you said, kind of clarified my thought process. It was a little cloudy at the time. I think they're the wrong vehicle for telling the story. I know the story that they're getting at, but I almost feel like because they're the vehicle that's carrying this, right? That's allowing these things to happen or the story to be told. I almost feel like you don't need them. Like you could have taken them out and done something a little different and still told the story that they're trying to tell, or maybe even have told a better story, because there's some tropiness that's involved with the idea of we've got twins again. We've got I'm good, I'm bad. Oh wait, now I'm good again. Like it's stuff we've seen before, and I think the thing that we're begging for in a sense and we've said this before in our other podcasts, which everyone should be checking out and subscribing below and rewatching everything 5, 6, 7, 8, 900 times, is we want something fresh that doesn't have to go back to that. And instead of putting a layer on the top of it to try and make it look like it's something new and something different, it's the same story again, which is something we've said we need to break away from, and that's what we're hoping for in these Star Wars, new iterations of Star Wars that are coming out. Like the Skeleton Crew that's coming out. I'm hoping it's got nothing to do with, I don't know if I want to see a Jedi. Like, you know what I mean? Are we going to get away from it?
Brace yourself.
Or the Skywalkers?
Brace yourself. There will be a Jedi, so brace yourself.
All right, well, we'll rate that when we get to it. But anyway, I'll go first. Too bad. I give it a blue. I am thirsting for more, and I am hoping that the next 2 episodes quench that thirst with something different, and that the water is not tainted. It's actually cool and refreshing, and takes care of that thirst for Star Wars that we all have. So blue for now. We'll see what happens later. Urza Master.
Oh,
I also give it a blue. It's a vehicle. I can't judge it on its own. It's part of a greater whole of probably the last 2 episodes. So if I had to have any major criticism that drops it, it's that it's setting stuff up, and then the cliffhanger is that, okay, things are set up, we'll be back next week. I don't like that. I would much rather they make this one long episode 6 and maybe make a 7-episode season. But to have like a 35-minute episode where they're just sort of teasing the next episode, this is already a mini-series. To have a filler episode like that kind of irks me. I still enjoyed it. It was still good. It does make me feel very cautious about where the series is going. But I'm going to let it rest. I'm going to wait for that to proof.
with all due respect to the council, my enthusiasm has not tempered. I still believe in where this show is going and what it ultimately wants to say. I'm pushing all my chips in. This is my final Sabek chip, and this is all I've got, but I'm pushing it to the center of the table, and I'm saying let it ride. Just be prepared. We're going to have probably, if not an entire flashback episode, some extensive flashbacks in episode 7, culminating in what probably will be close to a 1 hour. You will note that most of these episodes of The Acolyte have been fairly trim. 32, 34, 36-minute episodes. So if they were ever going to maybe give it a little extra juice, you might see them in these next 2 episodes. You might see things closer to 49, 50, even 60 minutes to be able to work it all in there. I don't think we'll have, like we did in episode 3, I don't think we will have a complete flashback episode that only stays in the past. I think we will have some present day maneuverings in the next episode, but I think the bulk of it will take place on Brendok during that run up to and that fateful night. And then I think, all Sith is going to break loose on chapter 8 there. So, and Lord Uther brings a good point. A lot of times shows, they say like, oh, let's get a season 2. And you're like, but of Shogun? Really? Not that I didn't love FX's Shogun, but they filmed the book. So anything that they do now is off book and just they're making it up in the writer's room as they go. And so sometimes you're like, yes, I want to see more of this. And then sometimes you're like, well, wait a minute. They've told the story. Why are we extending this any further? I think that Leslie Headland has said up front that there is more runway in this story. And I think how this season plays out depends on how much runway Lucasfilm, Disney Plus, whom the powers that be decide to go with it. Ahsoka, in its first season, was very satisfying to us. But how disappointed would we have been if that had been it? Grand Admiral Thrawn returned from the distant galaxy. Ahsoka and Sabine and Ezra are stranded, or Ezra made it out, but they're stranded on the planet and can't get back. I mean, it's like Twin Peaks. We would have been sitting there frustrated, like, wait a minute, that can't be it, right? And thankfully, we will have an Ahsoka season 2, probably in 2025. So this Acolyte, we may be building to something that's not really a true conclusion. And I don't think we'll have those answers set in stone yet. It could be that they wrap it up in these last 2 chapters, and it could be that they're just, again, laying more groundwork to extend and tease and further go with the story. And that might alleviate some concerns that we're been expressing here in the council in terms of, you know, where this could possibly go and how much is. Kimar didn't learn all of his Sith lore, you know, that didn't just come to him from the womb. He picked it up somewhere, whether it was on Brendok with the Coven, or as Jedi Master Urza Master suggested, a Darth Plagueis. You know, what happened to Mother Coral, who was a militant Force witch? You know, I don't think her body was ever seen in that 3rd chapter. And, you know, is she been in this somehow? You know, does Mother Anastasia survive? And I mean, there's all sorts of things that they can still do. And like I say, I'm glad we're all keeping our open minds. But again, if they decide to do a season 2, then we won't be getting that kind of closure and wrap up that we're expecting. Instead, we'll just be setting the stage for future installments. So green for me, and full speed ahead.
And until we get back to that galaxy far, far away, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Head back into those archives. See if you can follow this Acolyte storyline. Let us know in the comments, where do you think this is headed? Who do you think may be really pulling the strings? Could it be Jar Jar Binks? Now this is pod racing. Until next time, may the Force be with you.